The old state correctional facility loomed against the Providence skyline like a tombstone. Built in 1878, the structure had the kind of architecture that seemed designed to crush hope. All Gothic spires and narrow windows that looked less like openings to the world and more like gaps in a skull. I pulled into the empty parking lot at 10:30, my headlights cutting through the October fog that seemed to cling to the building like it belonged there. 3 months. That's all I needed to make it through. 3 months of night shifts. Then I'd have enough saved to finally leave this city and start over somewhere that didn't know about my past. Somewhere that didn't whisper when I walked by. The day supervisor, Officer Brennan, was waiting by the employee entrance. He was a tall man, maybe late 40s, with the kind of lean build that suggested he'd either been athletic once or never ate. His eyes had a hollowed-out quality that I recognized from my own mirror lately, the look of someone who wasn't sleeping well. "Tyler?" he asked, though we both knew who I was. This was my first night, and there were only 2 of us on the schedule. "That's me." He nodded and unlocked the heavy steel door. "Let's make this quick. My daughter's got a recital tonight, and I'm already late." The interior was worse than the outside. The overhead lights were the old fluorescent kind, flickering and buzzing like dying insects. The paint on the walls had probably been white once, but had faded to the color of old bones. Everything smelled like mildew and something else. Something I couldn't quite identify. Rot, maybe, but not quite. It was organic and wrong. "Facilities scheduled for demolition in 3 months, Brennan said as we walked down the main corridor. His keys jangled with each step, the sound echoing strangely. Only 6 inmates left. They transferred them here from other facilities due to behavioral issues. "What kind of behavioral issues?" Brennan didn't answer immediately. We passed through 2 more security doors, each one seeming heavier than the last, before reaching the cell block. It was a long corridor with 3 cells on each side, numbered 1 through 6. The lights here were dimmer, and that strange smell was stronger. The kind that made other facilities uncomfortable, Brennan finally said. "Your job is simple. Do rounds every hour. Check that all inmates are accounted for. Don't engage in conversation unless absolutely necessary. File any incidents in the logbook." He paused at the entrance to the office. A small room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a wall of monitors showing different angles of the cell block. "And follow the rules." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It wasn't official stationery, just notebook paper with handwritten text in blue ink. The writing was shaky, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry or upset. I unfolded it and read, "Night Watch Protocols. 1. Never look directly into cell 4 between 2 and 4. 2. If you hear singing, check cell 6 immediately. 3. Do not respond if an inmate uses your first name. They shouldn't know it. 4. If all 6 cells go silent simultaneously, lock yourself in the office until sunrise. 5. Keep the lights in the east corridor off after midnight. 6. Follow these rules exactly." I looked up at Brennan. "Is this a joke?" His expression didn't change. "You'll understand soon enough. The official manual is on the desk. Emergency numbers are posted by the phone. Radio's here if you need it, but reception can be spotty." He checked his watch. I need to go. Good luck, Tyler. Wait, you didn't explain the rules. What do you mean, don't look into cell 4? What am I supposed to? But he was already walking away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor until a door slammed somewhere in the distance, and I was alone. I stood in the office for a few minutes, reading the handwritten rules again. They had to be some kind of hazing ritual for new guards, a way to freak out the newbie. I'd heard about this kind of thing. Older cops telling rookies about fake procedures, watching them follow nonsensical orders before revealing the joke. Except Brennan hadn't been smiling, and his eyes had looked genuinely relieved when he left, like he was escaping something. The clock on the wall read 10:47. My shift didn't officially start until 11, but I decided to do an early round, get familiar with the layout. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk. The overhead lights in the cell block were on, but something told me I'd want backup, and headed down the corridor. Cell 1 was first on the left. Through the small window in the steel door, I could see Thomas Greer. His file said he was 63, convicted of triple homicide back in 1998. He sat on the edge of his bunk, perfectly still, staring at the wall opposite him. His hands were folded in his lap. He didn't blink, didn't move at all, actually. Not even the slight rise and fall of breathing. I watched him for 30 seconds. He never moved. Cell 2 was on the right, directly across from Thomas. I looked through the window and felt my stomach drop. The cell was empty, but the bed was made with perfect military corners, sheets pulled so tight you could bounce a quarter off them. There was condensation on the small mirror mounted above the sink, like someone had just taken a hot shower. But the sink was dry. So was the floor. I checked the door, locked securely. Cell 3, left side. Kevin Walsh, 40 years old, convicted of arson that killed 2 people. He was lying on his bunk, and I could see his arms in the dim light. They were covered in scars, not random, but deliberate lines that ran from his wrists to his shoulders. The scars formed patterns, like someone had carved channels into his skin. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, lips moving soundlessly. Cell 4, right side. I approached the door and remembered the handwritten rule. Never look directly into cell 4, between 2 and 4. It wasn't even midnight yet, so I should be fine. I looked through the window. Something very tall and very thin was standing in the far corner. I say something because I couldn't quite process what I was seeing. The figure was humanoid, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall to stand upright in the cell. It had to hunch, its head tilted at an angle that hurt to look at. I couldn't make out details in the shadows, but I had the distinct impression that it was looking back at me. I stepped back from the door, heart pounding. The file for cell 4 had been in the stack on the desk, but I realized now I hadn't read it. I'd look at it after finishing the round. Cell 5, left side. Raymond Cole, 51, former preacher, convicted of... The file had been vague on specifics, just listed multiple counts of endangerment. He was sitting cross-legged on his bunk, swaying slightly, whispering to himself. I pressed my ear close to the door and immediately wished I hadn't. The words were English, but backward, like he was speaking in reverse. It made my head hurt to listen to. Cell 6, right side. Peter Novak, 22, by far the youngest inmate. He was standing at the bars of his cell door, hands wrapped around them. grinning at me. He had the kind of face that should have looked friendly. Young, round features, bright eyes. But something about his expression was deeply unsettling. "Evening, Tyler," he said cheerfully. "Welcome to the night shift." I froze. The rule echoed in my head. Do not respond if an inmate uses your first name. They shouldn't know it. "How do you know my name?" I asked, immediately regretting it. I'd already broken the rule by responding. Peter's grin widened. "I know lots of things, like how you got this job because nobody else wanted it, like how you're planning to quit in 3 months, like how you won't make it that long." He tilted his head, still smiling. "None of us do." I backed away from his cell and returned to the office, my hands shaking slightly. I sat at the desk and pulled out the files, looking for cell 4's occupant. The file was thin. No name, just a number. 04-1987. No photograph. No conviction details. Just a single line under notes. Do not engage. Do not look directly at subject for extended periods. Transfer not recommended. Transfer not recommended? What the hell did that mean? I checked the clock. 11:43. The facility felt too quiet. In the movies, prisons were always noisy. Inmates yelling, banging on bars, the constant background hum of confinement. Here, there was nothing. Just the buzz of the fluorescent lights, and occasionally the building settling, wood and metal creaking like old bones. At midnight, I got up to turn off the lights in the east corridor, following the handwritten rules. The switch was at the far end, past all 6 cells. As I walked, I felt eyes on me. I didn't look into any of the windows, but I knew they were watching. All of them. The east corridor was a shorter hallway that branched off to the right, leading to what looked like old storage rooms and offices. I flipped the switch, and the entire corridor went dark. In the blackness, I heard something shuffle, like footsteps, but heavier. I didn't wait to investigate. I walked back quickly to the office, resisting the urge to run. 1 o'clock. Time for official rounds. I grabbed my flashlight and the logbook, then headed back to the cells. Thomas was still in the exact same position, staring at the wall. Kevin was still on his bunk, arms crossed over his chest now, eyes closed. Raymond was still whispering. The figure in cell 4 had moved. Now it was sitting on the bunk, hunched over, and I carefully avoided looking directly at it. Peter was awake, sitting on his bunk, watching me. "You hear it yet?" he asked. I didn't respond. I marked the log. 1 o'clock. All inmates accounted for. No incidents. Back in the office, I tried to focus on the paperwork Brennan had left. Employee information forms, union documentation, insurance paperwork. But my eyes kept drifting to the monitors. Cell 2 was still empty. The bed was still perfectly made. But now there was something else. A dark smudge on the wall, like a handprint. I was sure it hadn't been there before. At 1:30, I heard it. A woman's voice, distant but clear, singing a lullaby. The melody was old-fashioned, something from another era. The words were unclear, but the tone was unmistakable. A mother singing to her child. I checked the monitors. None of the inmates were moving. The singing wasn't coming from them. The rule came back to me. If you hear singing, check cell 6 immediately. I ran down the corridor, my footsteps echoing. Peter was standing at his cell door, hands wrapped around the bars, that same unsettling grin on his face. "She's back," he said. "You should let her in. She only wants to see her son." The singing was louder now, and I realized it was coming from cell 2. I walked across the corridor and looked through the window. In the shadows at the far end of the cell, I could see a figure, small, hunched, swaying slightly as it sang. The melody echoed off the concrete walls, making it hard to tell where it was actually coming from. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on, shining it through the window into cell 2. The cell was empty. The perfectly made bed, the condensation-covered mirror, the handprint on the wall, all still there, but no figure, no source for the singing. Except the singing hadn't stopped. It was still coming from inside the cell. "She doesn't like the light," Peter said from behind me. "She's shy. Been that way for over 100 years. I spun around. Peter was still in his cell. He couldn't have gotten out. But his voice had sounded like it was right behind me, like he was standing in the corridor. The singing abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air pressure had suddenly changed. My ears popped. "You should go back to the office," Peter said, his voice normal now, coming from his cell. "It's almost 2 o'clock. I looked at my watch. 1:54. The rule: never look directly into cell 4 between 2 and 4. I walked back to the office, forcing myself not to run, feeling those eyes on my back again. I sat at the desk and watched the clock. 1:56, 1:57, 1:58. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flickering seeming to sync with my heartbeat. 1:59. I busied myself with paperwork, determined not to look at the monitors. I wouldn't look. I'd follow the rules, finish my shift, and tomorrow night I'd call in sick. I'd quit. I'd find another job, any job, anything that didn't involve being alone in this building with 6 inmates who weren't quite right and cells that weren't quite empty. 2 o'clock. The power flickered. The overhead lights died, plunging the office into darkness. A second later, the emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in red. The monitors were dead. The computer was off. Even the clock had stopped. I sat perfectly still, listening. Footsteps in the corridor, slow, deliberate. But the rhythm was wrong. Instead of the regular 1-2, 1-2 of normal walking, it was 1-2-3, 1-2-3. Like something with too many legs trying to mimic human movement. The footsteps grew closer. I could see the corridor from where I sat, could see the red emergency lights casting long shadows, but I couldn't see what was making the sound. 1-2-3, 1-2-3. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. I held my breath, my hand instinctively reaching for the radio on my belt. But what would I say? Who would I call? Brennan had made it clear this was normal. This was what happened here. A shadow passed under the door, but it was wrong. Too many appendages, too many angular protrusions. It moved like a spider, but huge, the size of a person. I closed my eyes, counting silently. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 5 Mississippi, the main power kicked back on. The fluorescent lights flickered to life. The monitors hummed as they rebooted. The clock on the wall showed 2:17. The shadow was gone. The footsteps had stopped. But when I looked at the monitor, showing the corridor outside the office, I could see something at the far end. just at the edge of the camera's range. Something tall and hunched, disappearing into the darkness of the east corridor. I stayed in the office until 3 o'clock, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles were white. I had to do rounds. It was in the official procedure, and despite everything, some part of me still clung to the idea that if I followed the rules, both the official ones and the handwritten ones, I'd be okay. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the corridor. The air felt different now, heavier, like the building itself was pressing down. Thomas in cell 1 had moved for the first time since I'd arrived. He was now facing the door, sitting on the edge of his bunk, eyes open and unblinking, staring directly at me. "It's awake," he said. His voice was monotone, completely flat, like a computer-generated speech. "It's been sleeping for 23 years. You woke it up." "What are you talking about?" I asked, immediately regretting engaging with him. Thomas raised one hand and pointed to the wall between his cell and cell 2. "Listen." I pressed my ear to the cold concrete. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, I detected a sound from inside the wall itself, scratching, like fingernails on stone, but deeper inside, coming from within the structure. "Don't listen to it," Kevin's voice suddenly screamed from cell 3. I jumped back from the wall. Kevin was standing at his cell door, hands pressed against the window, his scarred arms visible in the light. "Don't listen to it. It'll get in your head. It'll make you like us." The scratching grew louder, more rhythmic. It sounded almost like a heartbeat. Scratch, 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 scratch. From cell 5, Raymond's backward whispering increased in volume, as if responding to the scratching. The sounds overlapped, creating a discordant harmony that made my teeth ache. I looked at the other cells. Thomas was still pointing at the wall. Kevin was still pressed against his door, eyes wide. Raymond was swaying faster, whispering louder. Even the figure in cell 4 had moved. I could see it standing now, pressed against its door, though I carefully avoided looking directly at it. Only Peter seemed unbothered. He was lying on his bunk, hands behind his head, that grin still on his face. "They're all connected to it," Peter called out. "All of us are. Except you. Not yet, anyway." I backed away from the cells and returned to the office, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. I tried the radio. Static. I picked up the desk phone. No dial tone. I pulled out my cell phone. No signal. I was completely cut off. At 3:45, an alarm started blaring. I checked the monitors and felt my stomach drop. Cell 2's door was open, swinging slightly on its hinges. That was impossible. The cells could only be opened with a key card, and mine was attached to my belt. There was no other way to open them from the outside, and they certainly couldn't be opened from the inside. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the cell block. Cell 2's door was indeed open. The heavy steel swung wide. I approached cautiously, shining my light inside. The walls were covered in handprints, small handprints, like a child's, but wrong. They were wet, glistening in the light, and they covered every surface, the walls, the ceiling, even the bed. The perfectly made bed sheets had been pulled onto the floor and arranged in the shape of a person, as if someone had been lying there and then evaporated, leaving only the outline. I heard breathing behind me. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The corridor was empty, but I could still hear it. Slow, labored breathing, like someone struggling to get air. When I turned back to cell 2, there was a small figure standing in the far corner, child-sized, but the proportions were wrong. The limbs were too long, the joints bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. It tilted its head and I heard bones cracking. "Mama?" it asked in a child's voice, but layered somehow, like multiple voices speaking in unison. I backed away from the door, my hands fumbling for my keycard. The figure took a step forward into the light from the corridor. It wasn't a child. It was something pretending to be one. Something that had maybe watched children once and tried to copy them, but gotten the details wrong. Its skin was grey, the texture like clay that hadn't quite dried. Its eyes were too large, taking up most of its face, and they didn't reflect light the way human eyes should. "Mama?" it asked again, taking another step. I slammed the cell door shut and locked it with shaking hands. Through the window, I watched the thing press itself against the glass, leaving smudges that looked like handprints but with too many fingers. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and it started to sing that lullaby again, the same one I'd heard earlier. Then it walked backward into the shadows, its joints bending the wrong way, and vanished. I ran back to the office and slammed the door, pushing the filing cabinet against it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I grabbed the phone again. Still no dial tone. I tried calling Brennan on my cell phone, despite having no signal. It went to voicemail. "This is Officer Brennan. I can't take your call right now. If this is an emergency, contact dispatch. If this is Tyler, I told you. Follow the rules." The voicemail cut off. From the cell block, I heard laughter. Peter's laughter, loud enough to echo through the entire building. "He won't answer," Peter called out. They never do after the first call. "You're alone now, Tyler. Just like we are. Just like the night watch is supposed to be." I approached the office door, staying close to the filing cabinet. What the hell is happening here? What is this place? Peter's laughter stopped abruptly. When he spoke again, his voice was serious for the first time. "You really don't know. They didn't tell you anything before they hired you." "Tell me what?" "This jail was built in 1878, yeah, but it was built on top of something older, something that was already here. In 1894, there was a fire in the basement levels. 7 women and 9 children died. They sealed the basement afterward, filled it with concrete, said it was for structural stability. But that was a lie. I didn't respond, just listened. The women and children never left. Peter continued. They're still down there, or something that used to be them is. The basement's still sealed, but they found another way up. Through the walls, through the spaces between things, and every few years, the jail brings in special inmates. People like us." "What do you mean, people like you?" "We're thin," Peter said. "The walls between us and them, between this world and whatever they come from. Those walls are thin inside us. We've done things that opened us up, made us vulnerable. They use us like doorways. We're anchors, keeping them contained to this cell block. As long as we're here, they stay here." I felt sick. "How long have you been here?" 8 months. Raymond's been here 8 years. Thomas, 6. Kevin, 4. The thing in cell 4, we don't know. It was here when the last guard started, and it'll be here when you leave. If you leave, what happens to you? Eventually, Peter was quiet for a moment. Eventually, the thing we're connected to takes us completely. Then they bring in a new one. It's a cycle. The state knows. The corrections department knows. But officially, they can't acknowledge it because officially, none of this exists. That's insane. Is it? You saw the thing in cell 2. You heard the singing. You felt the building change after 2 o'clock. Tell me that's insane, Tyler. Tell me this is all in your head. I couldn't. Because he was right. I'd seen it. I'd felt it. The previous night watch lasted 3 months before he quit, Peter said. Smart guy. Got out while he still could. The one before that made it 5 months. Lost too much of himself. Last I heard, he's in a psychiatric facility in Massachusetts. Keeps talking about the singing. I checked the clock. 4:01. The window from the rules had passed. I should be safe to look at cell 4 now. I watched the monitor showing cell 4. The figure was standing at the bars now, pressed against the door. It was impossibly tall, having to hunch even while standing to fit in the frame. And as I watched, it turned its head to look directly at the camera, directly at me. I felt pressure in my head immediately, like the worst migraine I'd ever experienced multiplied by 10. Images flashed through my mind, memories that weren't mine. Dark water, hands pushing me under, the feeling of drowning, the taste of rot, the sound of screaming that went on forever. I tore my gaze away from the monitor and squeezed my eyes shut, but the images kept coming. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to push them out, but it was like they were being projected directly into my brain. When I finally opened my eyes, the pressure had lessened, but not disappeared. I looked at the office window, at my reflection in the dark glass. There was someone standing behind me. I spun around. The office was empty. But when I looked back at the window, the figure was still there in the reflection, tall, hunched, the same impossible proportions as the thing in cell 4. It raised one hand and pressed it against the window from inside the reflection. I heard a sound then, a low, grinding noise, like metal scraping against stone. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating through the building itself. At 4:30, I realized I couldn't hear anything from the cells. No whispering from Raymond, no movement from Thomas, no sound at all. I checked the monitors. All 6 cells were completely silent. The inmates were in their positions, but nobody was moving, not even breathing as far as I could tell. The rule came back to me. If all 6 cells go silent simultaneously, lock yourself in the office until sunrise. I was already in the office. The filing cabinet was already against the door, but I double-checked the lock anyway, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the mechanism. I sat at the desk, watching the monitors, watching the clock. 4:35, 4:40, 4:45. The shadows in the corridors were moving independently of the emergency lights. On the cell 2 monitor, the child figure was standing in the center of the room, perfectly still, facing the camera. As I watched, more handprints appeared on the walls around it, spreading like a disease. At 4:47, something pounded on the office door. The impact was so hard the entire door frame shook. The filing cabinet scraped across the floor an inch. Dust fell from the ceiling. Again, boom. The wood cracked. The filing cabinet moved another inch. Again. Boom. I could see the steel reinforcement in the door buckling. Between the impacts, I heard voices, all 6 inmates speaking in unison, chanting something in that backward language Raymond used. The words made my teeth ache, made my eyes water, made something deep in my chest vibrate uncomfortably. Boom! The filing cabinet was halfway across the floor now. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. Even the emergency lights were dead. I sat frozen at the desk, listening to my own breathing, feeling my heart trying to break through my ribs. My radio crackled to life in the darkness. A woman's voice singing that lullaby. Then a child's voice, "Let me in. I'm cold." Then a man's voice, "Open the door, Tyler. We just want to talk." I recognized the voice. It was my father's, but my father had been dead for 3 years, had died of a heart attack while I was in county lockup for a DUI. I never got to say goodbye. "Tyler," my father's voice said through the radio, "I forgive you. Just open the door, and I'll tell you in person." I dropped the radio like it was burning. It clattered on the floor, the voice still coming through. "Tyler, son, please." The pounding on the door stopped. The voices stopped. The silence that followed was worse somehow, heavier, like the air itself was waiting. I heard breathing in the office with me. My hands fumbled for the flashlight on the desk. I found it, turned it on, and swept the room. Empty. Just the desk, the filing cabinet, the monitors, the door. But in the corner, near the filing cabinet, there was a wet handprint on the wall, small, child-sized. It definitely hadn't been there before. I kept the flashlight trained on it, watching. As I watched, another handprint appeared beside it, the wall darkening as if something invisible was pressing against it. Then another, and another. They moved across the wall like something was crawling, tracking toward me. I backed against the door, the very door I'd been so desperate to keep closed. The handprints kept coming, appearing one after another, moving closer. They reached the desk, started moving across its surface. Then they stopped, inches from where I stood. I could see the wall was still wet, the handprints glistening in my flashlight beam. At 5:15, the emergency lights flickered back on. The handprints were gone. The wall was dry. But I could still smell it, that wet, organic smell of rot and mildew. I stayed pressed against the door, flashlight held in front of me like a weapon, until 6 o'clock. When I heard keys jangling in the lock, I nearly screamed. The door opened, pushing me forward, and Brennan stepped inside. He looked at my face and nodded, like he'd expected exactly what he saw. "You followed the rules," he said. "Good." I wanted to punch him. I wanted to grab him and shake him and demand real answers. Instead, I just said, "What the hell is this place?" Brennan moved the filing cabinet back to its position against the wall. "It's exactly what I told you. A correctional facility is scheduled for demolition in 3 months. That's not an answer." He sighed and sat on the edge of the desk. "The jail can't be demolished until the residents are dealt with. Not the inmates, the others, the ones downstairs, the ones in the walls. And we can't deal with them because we don't know how, so we contain them. The 6 inmates serve as anchors. Their presence keeps the things confined to this cell block. What happens when inmates die or get transferred? The entities get stronger. 2 months ago, we had 12 inmates. Now we have 6. Each time one leaves, the activity increases. The boundaries get thinner. Why tell people to work here? Why not just shut it down? Brennan looked at me with those hollow eyes. Because if no one watches, they get out. They've tried. In 1983, there was a staffing shortage. No one watched for 3 nights. 7 people died in the neighborhood next door. Unexplained deaths, drowning with no water, suffocation in open air. The police investigation went nowhere because there was no evidence, no way to explain what happened. But we knew. The corrections department knew. So we keep watch, always. I looked at the monitors. All the inmates were back in their usual positions, as if nothing had happened. Thomas staring at the wall, Kevin lying on his bunk, Raymond whispering, Peter sleeping, the figure in cell 4 sitting hunched in the corner, except cell 2's door was slightly ajar again. "You need to leave," I said to Brennan. "You said your daughter has a recital." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That was just an excuse. "I don't have a daughter, Tyler. I've been here 5 years. Used to have a daughter, a wife, a life outside. But that was before. Now there's just this." I saw what he meant when he turned slightly, and I caught his reflection in the office window. His reflection moved a half second behind his actual movements, like there was lag, like the reflection was copying him rather than being him. 3 months, Brennan said. That's the safe window. Stay longer, and you become like the inmates. Like me. Get out while you're still mostly you. I gathered my things with shaking hands, desperate to leave, to get out into the daylight and pretend none of this had happened. Brennan started his paperwork, settling into the office like he belonged there. Maybe he did now. I walked out through the security doors, through the main corridor, out the employee entrance into the parking lot. The sun was rising over Providence, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Normal colors. Normal light. The kind of morning that made you forget things, like what I'd just experienced. I looked back at the jail. From the outside, it looked almost normal. Just an old building scheduled for demolition. But I could see Cell 2's window from here. A small rectangle of dark glass on the second floor. There was a handprint on the inside. Small, child-sized. As I watched, another appeared beside it, then another, like something was pressing against the glass from inside, over and over, desperate to get out or maybe just to be seen. I got in my car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something in the back seat. A small figure, hunched with 2 long limbs. I jerked around to look. Nothing there, just empty seats and my jacket on the floor. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. See you tonight. I sat in my car in that empty parking lot as the sun climbed higher, trying to convince myself not to quit. I needed this job. I needed the money. 3 months. Just 3 months. And I'd have enough saved to leave Providence, to start over somewhere else. 87 more nights. That's all I had to make it through, if I made it that long. If I remembered to leave before I became like Brennan, like the inmates, like something trapped between this world and whatever was beneath that old jail. I drove home as the city woke up around me. Normal people heading to normal jobs, living normal lives. They walked past the old state correctional facility every day and never thought about what was inside, never wondered why a building scheduled for demolition still kept staff, still kept inmates, still kept watch through the long, dark hours between midnight and dawn. In 3 months, I told myself, I'd quit. I'd move far away. Maybe California, like the previous guard. Distance mattered, he'd said. It helped, even if it didn't stop things completely. I almost believed it. But that night, at 10:30, I'd be back. I'd pull into that empty parking lot, walk through that employee entrance, take my position in that office with its flickering lights and wrong sounds. Because someone had to watch. Because the alternative, letting those things break containment, letting them spread into the city, was worse. And because part of me, a part that was growing larger with each passing hour, wanted to go back, wanted to see what else was there, what other rules I'd have to follow, what other impossible things lurked in those cells and corridors. That was the worst part, I realized, as I pulled into my apartment complex. Not the fear, not the horror, but the fascination, the awful growing certainty that I'd been shown something real, something that most people never saw, never believed in. And once you'd seen it, once you knew it was there, you couldn't unknow it. You couldn't go back to pretending the world was just what you could see in daylight. I made it up the stairs to my apartment, my legs heavy, my hands still trembling slightly. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Dishes in the sink, laundry on the couch, the TV frozen on the menu screen of some streaming service. Normal, safe, boring. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those handprints spreading across the wall, heard that child's voice asking for its mother, felt the pressure in my head from looking at cell 4's occupant. I lay in bed for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling before giving up. I got up and opened my laptop, searching for information about the old state correctional facility. There wasn't much. A few historical society pages, some architectural blog posts about Providence's Gothic revival buildings. Nothing about the 1894 fire. I dug deeper, searching newspaper archives. Finally, in the Providence Journal's digitized records from October 1894, I found it. Tragedy at women's shelter. 7 dead, 9 children. Perish in basement fire. A devastating fire last night claimed the lives of 7 women and 9 children at the Providence Women's Charitable Home, located in the basement levels beneath the state correctional facility. The cause of the fire remains unknown, though investigators suspect faulty heating equipment. The basement has been deemed structurally unsound following the blaze and will be permanently sealed with concrete. The women's shelter program has been discontinued. There was more. A list of names, the 7 women, the 9 children. I wrote them down, though I wasn't sure why. Sarah Whitmore, age 28, and her son William, age 4. Catherine Mills, age 22, and her daughters, Anne and Elizabeth, ages 6 and 3. On and on, real people, real deaths. But the article bothered me. The cause of the fire remains unknown. And then, 3 days later, a follow-up piece. Coroner unable to determine cause of death for shelter victims. In an unusual development, the county coroner has stated that the cause of death for the 16 victims of last week's charitable home fire cannot be definitively determined. While the bodies showed signs of heat damage consistent with fire exposure, the coroner noted peculiar circumstances that have complicated the investigation. Several victims appeared to have died before the fire started, though from what cause remains unclear. The investigation has been closed at the request of the state authorities. I sat back, my stomach churning. They died before the fire, so what killed them? I kept searching and found a reference to the 1983 deaths Brennan had mentioned. It took some digging, but I finally located the articles. Series of unexplained deaths mystify police. Providence police are investigating a troubling series of deaths that have occurred over the past 3 days, all within a 2-block radius of the old state correctional facility. 7 residents have died under mysterious circumstances, with causes of death ranging from drowning, despite no water being present, to suffocation in well-ventilated rooms. The deaths appear unconnected, affecting individuals of varying ages and backgrounds. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. The investigation had been closed 2 weeks later, unsolved. But I found one more article, an interview with a survivor, published in a small alternative weekly. "I saw my dead daughter," says local man. Timothy Ashford, 54, was one of the few survivors of the recent wave of mysterious deaths in the South Providence neighborhood. Ashford claims to have seen his daughter, Emily, who died 5 years ago, standing in his bedroom 3 nights ago. "She asked me why I let her die," Ashford said. "She looked exactly like she did the day she drowned. I tried to tell her it was an accident, that I loved her, but she just kept asking over and over." Ashford was found unconscious in his home the following morning by neighbors. He refuses to return to his residence and has been staying with relatives in Connecticut. There was an editor's note at the bottom. Timothy Ashford died by suicide on October 28, 1983. 2 weeks after this interview was conducted, I closed my laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my apartment. The sun had moved across the sky while I'd been reading, and now shadows stretched across my floor. Outside my window, I could see the Providence skyline, and somewhere out there, the old state correctional facility waited for nightfall. For me, my phone rang, startling me badly enough that I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. I answered. "Tyler?" The voice was male, exhausted, with an edge of something that might have been fear or might have been resignation. "It's Eric Townsend. I was the night watch before you. How did you get my number?" "Same way I got the job. Same way you got it. They keep a list." He paused. "You made it through your first night. That's good. That's better than some. You told Brennan I would come back. Did I?" "I don't remember that conversation." Another pause. "I don't remember a lot of things anymore. The details get fuzzy." "You said you're in California." "Yeah, San Diego. As far from Providence as I could get without leaving the continental US. Thought distance would help." He laughed, but it was hollow. "It helps a little. It's weaker here, but it still finds me." "What finds you?" "Whatever you're connected to now. Whatever's in that building. Once you're part of it, once they know you, you're never completely free. I see things sometimes. Shadows that move wrong. Handprints on my bathroom mirror. And I hear the singing. Always the singing." My mouth went dry. The woman's voice. The lullaby. You heard it too then. That's Emma Cartwright. She died in 1894. Her son, Thomas, 4 years old, died with her. She's been looking for him ever since. Cell 2 was built where the nursery used to be, back when it was the women's shelter. That's why she stays there. How do you know this? Because I made the mistake of trying to understand. I did research, talked to historians, visited the archives. The more I learned, the more they noticed me learning, the more they reached out. His voice dropped. Don't try to understand, Tyler. Don't look for answers. Just follow the rules. Do your time and get out. 3 months, no more. That's the window before you become like them. Before I become what? Thin, permeable, a doorway. That's what the inmates are. That's what Brennan is becoming. Every night you spend there, every time you see something you shouldn't be able to see, every time the rules keep you safe from something that shouldn't exist, you get a little thinner. The barriers inside you start to break down, and eventually, there's nothing keeping them out anymore. So why are you calling me? Why warn me if I'm already trapped? Eric was quiet for a long moment, because someone warned me. The guard before me, a woman named Linda Chen, she called me on my second night, told me everything I just told you. I thought she was crazy, but she was right about all of it. She's dead now, by the way. Killed herself 6 months after she quit. Couldn't take what followed her home. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Another hollow laugh. 3 months, Tyler. Mark it on your calendar. The day you hit 3 months, you quit. You leave Providence. You go somewhere far away and you start over. You don't tell anyone where you're going. You change your name if you can. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll only see them sometimes. In dreams, in mirrors, on bad nights. And if I don't make it 3 months, if I quit now, then they'll come for you anyway, but stronger. Because you broke the pattern. You abandoned your post. The thing about the rules at that place, they're not just keeping you safe from them. They're keeping them contained. If you leave before finding a replacement, before completing your cycle, you break the containment, and they'll punish you for it. The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, watching the last light fade from the sky. It was 6:30. I had 4 hours before my shift started. I thought about running, just packing a bag and driving, getting as far from Providence as I could before nightfall. But Eric's words echoed in my mind. If you leave before completing your cycle, you break the containment, and they'll punish you for it. I thought about those 7 deaths in 1983, about Timothy Ashford seeing his dead daughter, about Linda Chen, who'd killed herself rather than live with what followed her. At 7 o'clock, I forced myself to eat something, though it tasted like cardboard. At 8 o'clock, I took a shower, letting the hot water run until it went cold. At 9 o'clock, I put on my uniform, the same one I'd worn the previous night. It still smelled like that building, mildew and rot and something else. At 10 o'clock, I got in my car and drove toward the old state correctional facility. The building looked different at night. The streetlights didn't quite reach it, leaving it in shadows that seemed darker than they should be. The Gothic spires looked like claws reaching for the sky. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a small figure standing near the employee entrance. I hit the brakes, my heart hammering. The figure was child-sized, hunched, with limbs that bent at wrong angles. It stood perfectly still, facing my car. I blinked, and it was gone. Just a trick of the shadows, I told myself. Just my exhausted mind playing games. I'd barely slept in 36 hours. Of course, I was seeing things, but my hands were shaking as I got out of the car. The employee entrance was unlocked. Brennan was already inside, looking somehow worse than he had that morning. His skin had a grayish tint to it, and his eyes were bloodshot. His reflection in the glass of the security door moved a full second after he did now. "Evening, Tyler," he said. His voice sounded tired. "Ready for night 2? Does it get easier?" He smiled, but it was sad. "No, it gets harder. You just get more used to it. Here." He handed me another folded piece of notebook paper. "Tonight's rules. They change based on the previous night's activity. Last night was active." I unfolded the paper. Night watch protocols. Night 2. 1. Do not enter cell 2 under any circumstances. 2. If you hear your name called in your own voice, leave the building immediately and wait outside until dawn. 3. The east corridor must remain completely dark all night. Do not turn on any lights for any reason. 4. Do not make eye contact with any inmate for more than 3 seconds. 5. If the temperature drops suddenly, return to the office and lock the door. 6. Count the cells on every round. There should be 6. If you count a different number, skip that round and return to the office. 7. Follow these rules exactly. "What do you mean, count a different number?" I asked. "There are 6 cells." Brennan was already walking away. "Sometimes there are more, sometimes less. The building shifts. Just count them. And if the number's wrong, don't investigate. Come straight back." He was gone before I could ask anything else, disappearing through the security doors like he couldn't get away fast enough. I was alone again. I went to the office and sat at the desk, staring at the new rules. If you count a different number, how could there be a different number of cells? They were permanent structures, concrete and steel. They didn't just appear and disappear. Except everything I'd seen last night told me that logic didn't apply here. The laws of physics, of reality itself, were different in this building after dark. At 11 o'clock, I began my first round. I walked slowly down the corridor, counting under my breath. Cell 1, Cell 2, Cell 3, Cell 4, Cell 5, Cell 6, 6 cells, the correct number. Thomas was in his usual position in Cell 1, staring at the wall. I glanced at him briefly.